Saint Albert the Great, Bishop, Confessor, Doctor of the Church, 1280, Cologne, 81. It seems likely that Albert was born sometime before 1200, given well-attested evidence that he was aged over 80 on his death in 1280. More than one source says that Albert was 87 on his death, which has led 1193 to be commonly given as the date of Albert's birth. Albert was probably born in Lauingen, now in Bavaria, since he called himself Albert of Lauingen, but this might simply be a family name. Most probably his family was of ministerial class. His familiar connection with being son of the Count Bollstadt noble family was a 15th century misinterpretation that is now completely disproved. Albert was probably educated principally at the University of Padua, where he received instruction in Aristotle's writings. A late account by Rudolf de Neva Major refers to Albertus' encounter with the Blessed Virgin Mary, who convinced him to enter holy orders. In 1223 or 1229 he became a member of the Dominican order, and studied theology at Bologna and elsewhere. Selected to fill the position of lecturer at Cologne, Germany, where the Dominicans had a house, he taught for several years there, as well as in Regensburg, Freiburg, Strasbourg, and Hildesheim. During his first tenure as lecturer at Cologne, Albert wrote his Summa di Bono after discussion with Philip the Chancellor concerning the transcendental properties of being. In 1245, Albert became Master of Theology under Garrick of St. Quentin, the first German Dominican to achieve this distinction. Following this turn of events, Albert was able to teach theology at the University of Paris as a full-time professor, holding the seat of the chair of theology at the College of St. James. During this time Thomas Aquinas began to study under Albertus. Albert was the first to comment on virtually all of the writings of Aristotle, thus making them accessible to wider academic debate. The study of Aristotle brought him to study and comment on the teachings of Muslim academics, notably Avicenna and Averroes, and this would bring him into the heart of academic debate. In 1254 Albert was made provincial of the Dominican order, and fulfilled the duties of the office with great care and efficiency. During his tenure he publicly defended the Dominicans against attacks by the secular and regular faculty of the University of Paris, commented on John the Evangelist, and answered what he perceived as errors of the Islamic philosopher Averroes. In 1259 Albert took part in the general chapter of the Dominicans at Valenciennes together with Thomas Aquinas, Masters Bernuscio Brito, Florentius and Peter, later Pope Innocent V, establishing the Ratio Studiorum, or program of studies for the Dominicans that featured the study of philosophy as an innovation for those not sufficiently trained to study theology. This innovation initiated the tradition of Dominican scholastic philosophy put into practice. For example, in 1265 at the Order's Studium Provinciale at the convent of Santa Sabina in Rome, out of which would develop the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, the Angelicum. In 1260 Pope Alexander IV made him Bishop of Regensburg, an office from which he resigned after 3 years. During the exercise of his duties he enhanced his reputation for humility by refusing to ride a horse, in accord with the dictates of the order, instead traversing his huge diocese on foot. This earned him the affectionate sobriquet Boots the Bishop from his parishioners. In 1263 Pope Urban IV relieved him of the duties of bishop and asked him to preach the Eighth Crusade in German-speaking countries. After this, he was especially known for acting as a mediator between conflicting parties. In Cologne he's not only known for being the founder of Germany's oldest university there, but also for the Big Verdict of 1258, which brought an end to the conflict between the citizens of Cologne and the archbishop. Among the last of his labors was the defense of the orthodoxy of his former pupil, Thomas Aquinas, whose death in 1274 grieved Albert. The story that he traveled to Paris in person to defend the teachings of Aquinas cannot be confirmed. Albert was a scientist, philosopher, astrologer, theologian, spiritual writer, ecumenist, and diplomat. Under the auspices of Humbert of Romans, Albert molded the curriculum of studies for all Dominican students, introduced Aristotle to the classroom, and probed the work of Neoplatonists, such as Plotinus. Indeed, it was the 30 years of work done by Aquinas and himself that allowed for the inclusion of Aristotelian study in the curriculum of Dominican schools. After suffering a collapse of health in 1278, he died on November 15, 1280, in the Dominican convent in Cologne, Germany. Since November 15, 1954, his relics are in a Roman sarcophagus in the crypt of the Dominican St. Andreas Church in Cologne. Although his body was discovered to be incorrupt at the first exhumation 3 years after his death, at the exhumation in 1483 only a skeleton remained. Albert was beatified in 1622. He was canonized and proclaimed a Doctor of the Church on December 16, 1931, by Pope Pius XI, and the patron saint of natural scientists in 1941. St. Albert's feast day is November 15.